Hi, Lisa Marie Kosis, founder of Global One Health. This is another video in the shoulder series. As I mentioned, I'm going to address a few of the joint structures in the body and talk about their anatomical structure, but I also want to address in these subsequent videos exercises that you can do to strengthen the muscle groups that support, stabilize, and mobilize those specific joints. So I'm starting with the shoulder joint, and so far I've talked about the lats and the rhomboids, and I'm kind of starting from the back side of the shoulder complex and going to work my way around. So the last muscle group that I want to talk about when strengthening muscles from the back side of the shoulder joint, today it's going to be conversation is going to be talking about the serratus anterior. So just to review, muscles do come in many layers when you get to certain parts of the body. So the muscles closest to the skin are more superficial. So I've talked about the lats. I've talked about the trapezius in the How to Pack Your Shoulder video earlier on. But here, the serratus anterior, understanding that it's very much lies in the same place as the latissimus dorsi, or the lats, as they're called in abbreviation. Right, so the lat muscles wrap around the rib cage. So if you were to peel away the lat muscle, underneath it is the serratus anterior. So the serratus anterior is considered deep to the lat, underneath it. Now, if you've seen on bodybuilders when they're very, very developed in the musculature, and they pose and they have this kind of side view of the muscle, there's a muscle that kind of looks like fingers, and that's how it's referenced as the finger muscle. So when it's developed very clearly and specifically, the serratus anterior will look like fingers kind of wrapping around the lateral, from the back to the lateral side of the rib cage. So the serratus anterior, in terms of a prime mover, it is a protractor of the scapula or the shoulder blade. So if I push my arms or reach them away from my body and my scapula separate, that is protraction of the blades, which is activation of the serratus anterior muscle. The serratus anterior is also a very, very important stabilizer of the shoulder joint in certain positions. In planks, for example, all right, when there's no real movement of the shoulder joint, but you want to be really locked in to the muscles of that lateral posterior rib cage to really own the plank position, but also to provide much more support to the shoulder joint structure. So it's very important that the muscles that support the shoulder or surround the shoulder joint are strong. When you're under load, you want to make sure that they are actively working to stabilize. But how do we strengthen them through movement? Today I'm going to show you the serratus push-up. So the best way to learn it, the most basic way, is to keep the knees on the ground. The next progressed variation is you would just raise the knees slightly off. So the movement I'm going to be doing is going to look like this, but I'm going to use the ground for resistance. So in previous videos, I talk a lot about how to support the shoulder joint when weight bearing on the hands and knees. The regular version of the serratus push-up, when the knees are off, you want to have already been able to have practiced just holding this hand and knee position. So doing crawling with the knees down is a great regression or exercise drill to prepare you for something like a serratus push-up, because once the knees come off, you're putting the shoulder joint structure under greater load. So please do practice and get comfortable in this 6-point position with both feet, knees, and hands on the ground. Rocking is another example of a loaded movement that will strengthen the stabilizers. Just get used to being in that weight-bearing position on the shoulders before you take the knees off the ground. Practice this position first. And I have quite a number of videos that address weight-bearing on the arms that you can check out if you'd like. So when doing the serratus push-up, I want to get into the basic, it's referred to as quadruped position, even though you're on 6 points, technically, the 2 knees, the 2 hands, and the feet. We're going to talk about this position now. So I'm going to set up in the basic position my arms in a vertical position so my shoulders are lined up directly over my elbows and my wrists for now, and my thigh bones are also in a vertical position so my hips are set up over my knees. Now, I talk about when weight bearing, do not have a flat hand. You want to be using the hand. I talk about that in a number of other videos. You want to be gripping the fingertips into the ground to get activation of the muscles in the base, underneath the sides of the fingers, and in the palms of the hands. As always, when I'm weight bearing, there are 3 basic things I want to be doing. And I'm going to talk about them and review them again, and I talk about these in many videos because it is that important to protect your shoulder joint. 3 basic things you want to be doing. You want to drive your arms down into the ground as if you're trying to push the ground actively away from you. So there's a driving down energy, which is a vertical energy. I also want to corkscrew or externally rotate my arm bones in my sockets and pack my shoulders. So those are the 3 important things I need to be doing to turn on all of the muscle groups that support and stabilize the shoulder joint. Remember, in the anatomy portion of the shoulder series, which is the first video in the series, I really break down all of the muscle groups and how they affect the joint. And I mentioned that the rotator cuffs have a very important job of stabilizing the humerus, the upper arm bone in the socket. So if you want more information about that, check out that first video, because that's really why I started the series in the first place, is to talk about the anatomy of these joints, just so that you can keep the joints safe when moving and under greater load. Right, so I'm driving down, corkscrewing, and packing my shoulders. Now, I simply want to practice in a very modified way of actively pushing the ground away from me, which will cause a protraction of the shoulders. Now, if I move a little bit closer, notice my spine position. I do not want to do this. If I round my spine, that looks like cat-cow in yoga, or just the basic cat position of the rounding of the spine. That is a different movement. It is very different from protraction of the spine. So if you see in a seated position, if I were to just reach my arms forward, you can see how my scapula slide laterally around my rib cage to the sides of it, but I'm not moving my spine in this position. So it is not flexion of the spine. My spine stays neutral, which is why I want to engage my core and keep that tension in my trunk so that I can focus specifically on the serratus anterior muscle and not allow the spine to flex, which is now working completely other muscles and going to detract me from getting that nice activation of the serratus anterior, which is my intention in this exercise drill. So in pushing the ground away, I want to make sure I maintain engagement in the front, back, and sides of my TVA, my ab wall, but also my erectors a little bit, because if I allow my spine to round, I've now shut off or inhibited my spinal erector muscles to help stabilize my spine. So that's a very important footnote when doing serratus push-ups. You'll see it a little bit better when the knees are off, and that's actually going to be a bit more challenging. So now I corkscrew, pack, drive my arms down, grip my hands, push the balls of my feet and my toes into the ground, and I raise my knees up. So now my sacrum, shoulder blades, and skull are kind of parallel to the ceiling. I'm going to push the ground away, creating that sense of protraction of the spine, of the shoulder, without rounding my spine again. So this is a harder variation. I'm putting more load on my arms, shoulders, core, and thighs when I take my knees off. So be prepared that you're going to increase overall body activation in the entire body overall, right? So again, I'm pushing the ground away. I control my blades down into retraction. I'm not collapsing into my shoulders. I'm trying to actively use my rhomboids to retract my scapula in the negative portion, the return movement of the serratus push-up. So if I've done that nice work to protract my blades, my serratus anterior is going to control me back in, but I want to add rhomboid activation, like you would in a row, to do the negative portion of the serratus push-up. And of course, the final variation would be to do it in the most advanced version where you have your legs extended out and you're doing serratus push-ups in this position. But again, you want to make sure the butt does not come up, the spine is not rounding excessively, there's a slight posterior pelvic tilt of the lower back to get the activation of the glutes and the lower abs. But again, you're trying to isolate the movement. So it is a very small range of motion in the exercise because you're simply going for protraction and some retraction of the scapula. So keep the movement small. If it helps to record yourself to see if there's actually excessive movement in the spine, you can put the video and film yourself and check it out. It's always great to go back and look at what your form is. If you don't have a trainer or a coach or someone who can correct you at that time, you can at least see what your form looks like and go back and self-correct. And that's what these videos are here for, to provide all of the detailed instruction that you need to do each of the movements I'm addressing as cleanly as possible, which will always keep you safe in your movement when under load or in any given exercise. So I hope that is helpful, and that is the serratus push-up.